Welcome to Never Again Is Now, a podcast about anti-Semitism. I am Evelyn Marcus. My co-host Phyllis Zimler-Miller cannot join us today. Many young minds in America's classrooms are currently indoctrinated with anti-Zionist and anti-Semitic concepts and material. This can lead to a dangerous situation in the future for American Jews and for the American-Israeli relationship. We have the honor to discuss this with Brandy Shufutinsky. She is the director of the program on education and national security at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, a think tank in Washington, D.C. that advises government on national security. She developed a curriculum in critical anti-Semitism studies at the Institute for the Study of Global Anti-Semitism and Policy, or ISGAP. She has been published in Newsweek, the Jewish Journal, the Jerusalem Post, and other media. Brandy, welcome to our podcast. It's wonderful to have you on.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you. So, the program you lead examines the threats and vulnerabilities within America's education system. What are the main threats in America's education system regarding anti-Semitism?
So thinking about the threats to the American education system in relation to anti-Semitism and a host of other bad ideas, I think that there are three main points that are pretty broad, but I'll just go over them quickly. The first one is the ideological capture of educational institutions. So if we look at, say, higher education, there are a few different statistics, but all of them show that a significant majority of professors fall in line with one ideological political camp. And so most of them, again, significant majority of professors identify as left of center. So from progressive to liberal to moderate liberal. And what that does is it makes education and teaching come through one ideological lens in the higher education space. If we look lower at kindergarten through 12th grade, so we're K through 12, we're talking about roughly students ages 5 to 18. We also have a lot of that type of ideological capture seeping in and trickling down from the higher ed space into the K through 12 space. So we're seeing a radical shift in the beliefs about the role of the teacher, the role of school, and the role of education, and the roles that those should play in the lives of students. Again, we're talking about kids that are roughly the ages of 5 to 18 in the kindergarten through 12th grade space. And then we're also seeing, unfortunately, a degradation of scholarship. That plays the role of education and teachers and schooling plays quite a bit into this part. So the degradation in scholarship, we're talking about majors or in the higher ed space, or the foundational learning that usually happens in the kindergarten through 12th grade space that is just being eroded, where instead of focusing on student learning, instead of focusing on foundational learning, we're seeing other things come into play, whether those are things that are more society or sociologically driven, or things that are more related to behavioral or mental health, or things that are more related to student behavior rather than, again, scholarship. So foundational knowledge. So usually, again, in the kindergarten through 12th grade space, you see building blocks of citizenship, of English language learning, of mathematics. We're seeing that be minimized and be replaced with something else.
With what, for instance?
So one example, we see a huge focus in the K through 12 space, again, 5-year-old to 18-year-olds, and something like social emotional learning, or restorative justice programs, or culturally competent or culturally responsive teaching. And not that those things may not play a role or don't carry some weight, shouldn't be valued or important, but their level of importance is superseding the importance of actual scholarship and knowledge building.
Right. So you say that there is an overrepresentation. If you compare it to the people who vote in the United States, about half vote usually for Democrats and about half for Republicans. And last presidential elections, it was a bit more than half or a lot more than half for the Republican candidate. But if you look at the higher education space, you see an overrepresentation of teachers at the left. How overrepresented are they? Do you know a statistic about that?
I've seen multiple statistics. I've seen some that say, well, 80% of professors identify as being, say, politically identify with the Democratic Party versus the remaining 20 as Republican Party or independent. I've seen numbers upwards of 80%. So depending on what poll you're looking at, but a significant majority.
Mhm. And is there space in reality for that minority of professors who are more leaning towards the right to express those opinions as well, like their colleagues do from the perspective of the left?
I'm sure on some campuses there are, and I'm sure that there are individual professors who, if they hold conservative values, speak freely and openly about those values. I think where I look at isn't necessarily at the individual, it's looking at, well, what's the institutional policy that a specific university is implementing? So are they implementing institutional policies that are more aligned with those folks who are left of center? Or are they implementing institutional policies that are more aligned with those people that are right of center, or are they maintaining institutional neutrality? Now we are seeing a reversion back to universities saying, you know what, we got into a bit of hot water taking a political side, so we're going to roll that back and try to hold the standard of institutional neutrality. And they've been met with backlash from both faculty and students who actually are looking for the university as an institution to take a specific political or ideological position.
Okay. And what are the effects on anti-Semitism of this situation?
Well, with that, we have to kind of peel back the different layers of what ideological positions universities are holding. And unfortunately, the October 7th terrorist attack on Israel is giving us a front row seat to what that leads to as far as higher levels of anti-Semitism and anti-Jewish bigotry on campuses, both higher education and kindergarten through 12th grade. So we're seeing universities be pressured into making certain statements or adopting specific resolutions. Now, whether those are statements against the war in general, saying we hope for peace, or are they resolutions against Israel or calling what Israel's doing as far as waging a defensive war after being attacked on October 7th, labeling that a genocide or an ethnic cleansing or all of the other things that we see. So we need to look at what policies the universities are adopting, what resolutions, what's the language of the resolutions that are being put forward for a vote, what are things being labeled. And I think that's where we can kind of measure how that's impacting anti-Semitism on campus in one way. Another way we can look at it is there a double standard? Are all students being treated equally under the eyes of the law or the policies of the university? So we hear a lot of talk and have for the past, where are we at 20 months now of this war, where we're hearing people say, well, freedom of speech and academic freedom. Obviously, I'm a very proud American. I value both of those things. I value my freedom of speech. And as a scholar, I value the ideas of academic freedom. What we are seeing, though, is a double standard. And we saw that, unfortunately, the display by some university presidents who were testifying before Congress really were a pretty bad example of what happens when there's no morality in the positions taken. So these university presidents were asked, point blank, is calling for the genocide of Jews, does that violate your university policies? And they couldn't give a clear answer because ideologically they're prevented from acknowledging a truth. Calling for the genocide of anybody, and this isn't I'm not getting into the debate between hate speech versus free speech. In America, we have free speech. There aren't hate speech laws. There are, however, laws against harassment and bullying and threats. And what we've seen on campuses for the past year and a half plus have been Jewish students actively targeted, actively verbally harassed and physically attacked with no consequences on the perpetrator, or little to no consequences on the perpetrators of those attacks. And we're also seeing those attacks aren't just coming from fellow students. they're coming in instances from professors and sometimes outside agitators, which we see. And so we've heard, the conversations, well, if any other group were being targeted, if Black students were being targeted with this type of rhetoric, what would the university administration do? And I flip that question a little bit and wonder if the targeters, if the perpetrators of the type of violent rhetoric, harassment, physical attacks that have happened and been occurring, if they were of a different group, how would the university administrators react? Because we saw the political and ideological left stand up loud, strong. They still bring it up about the tiki tortures in Charlottesville, chanting, "The Jews will not replace us." They were perfectly comfortable calling out that group of white supremacists who were chanting, "The Jews will not replace us," and calling them out and labeling them the racists that they are. But they seem to hesitate or even just completely erase or diminish and ignore the fact that the people that are chanting for the same types of slogans and rhetoric today against Jews, these same folks refuse to label them as bigots when they're openly bigoted.
And what is the background of today's activists who call for violence against Jews?
Well, we see that many of them also are other white Americans. Many of them are Arab Americans. They come from it's a multi-ethnic group that is out there chanting for the erasure of the Jewish indigenous homeland. They're calling from the river to the sea for the land to be Jew-free. They're multi-ethnic, and so unfortunately the ideological and political left is refusing to condemn those statements and that rhetoric as racist, even though it clearly is.
Is that because of the content of the what is said, or is it because of the ethnic background of the people who say it?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think it
Mhm.
also, I don't know if you remember a few years back, it may have been around 2021, there was this idea, this push to reframe the definition of racism to where only white people could be racist.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
anyone else that actually exhibited bigotry, you couldn't call them racist if they weren't
Yeah,
white.
yeah,
This is falling in line with that ideology. If you accept only white people can be racist, then when somebody white says something racist, you're willing to label that person racist. And when somebody not white says something racist, you aren't. And I think that's what we're seeing
I
play out.
see. Yeah, I get it. Okay. So, you wrote about organizations with terrorist ties in Gaza that are training teachers in kindergarten through 12th grade classrooms across the United States. One example is the Teach Palestine project. What are teachers trained to teach about Palestine, and which classrooms are affected by it?
So this is something we're seeing roll out across the United States, this idea of a whole new curriculum and lessons on teaching Palestine. Big picture, what we're seeing that curriculum and those lessons do is erase Jewish peoplehood. So there is this attempt to portray Jews as not a people, not as not an ethno-religious group, an ancient ethno-religious group, but to simply paint Jewish people in terms of either a religious category or as being people that originated in Europe. We're seeing the erase, and in doing that, what it does is it erases the Jewishness of Israel. And at the same time, we're seeing this invention of a place called historic Palestine. Anyone who knows anything, anyone who's read a book or looked into it at all, knows where the name Palestine comes from. It's a slave name put on the land by Roman slavers. Um, there isn't even the sound P or letter P in the Arabic language, so that should be kind of a hint. In this invention of an ancient identity of Palestinian people being Arab. And again, you look at the flag of historic Palestine from the 1930s, and it has a Star of David on it because the land again was named that by Roman conquerors, which carried over from the Ottomans to the British when they were empires and had control over that land during those mandates. If you look at the passports or birth certificates of any Jewish person who has maintained lineage and continuity in the land of Israel pre-1948, pre-independence of the modern state of Israel, you'll see that it says Palestine or says Palestinian in reference to Jews, Muslims, Christians, Drusim, Bedouins, anyone who lived in the land of the mandate. So this curriculum is erasing all of that. it's completely rewriting history. It's portraying, again, Jewish people as invaders in their indigenous homeland, and portraying people who may have a claim to the land because they've been there for generations, but in no way are indigenous to the land as the indigenous people. It's akin to saying that anyone who is a descendant of people who came on the Mayflower are now the new Native Americans.
Yeah. Wow. And which classrooms are affected by it? How many?
We don't know a specific number. We do know that, again, kindergarten through 12th grade and in higher education, these resources are being pushed into the classroom. In fact, UCLA is offering an ethnic studies teacher credential teacher credential right now for, again, kindergarten through 12th grade teachers, and they're using Rethinking Schools teaching Palestine curriculum.
Okay.
And again, Los Angeles Unified School District is the second largest school district in the country.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if I understand it well, it also is usually a trendsetter for other parts of the country. Is that correct?
Yeah, California is in curriculum, and one of the reasons is California is the most populous state in the country. When curriculum is rolled out, they're curriculum makers, textbook makers, they're providers. They're not going to make different curricula for the thousands of school districts across the country. They look at where the population base is and really try to stick with the trends that are coming out of those areas, which is one reason why when we look at California and what's coming out of their K through 12 school district, it impacts people that live in every state of our country.
Mm-hmm. And is this only in public schools or also in private schools, as far as you know?
We've seen it in both.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so
Public,
it's
private, charter. We've seen it in both, all.
okay. So if parents don't like the idea of their kids being taught this rewritten history about the area of Israel, then they better look into what their kids are being taught about it.
Definitely.
Most of our listeners will be aware by now that the Islamist government of Qatar is the biggest foreign funder of higher education institutions in America. How has this affected anti-Semitism or anti-Israelism at American universities?
I think one of the things that we're seeing, and thank goodness for all of the dedicated researchers that have been and still are looking into foreign funding in our institutions of higher learning, what we're seeing is the takeover of specific departments. So we see, for example, Middle East studies departments in universities in the United States are predominantly they're predominantly pushing a specific narrative, again, about the Middle East, about the people there, about the culture there, and then also othering other groups that you don't really have a lot of scholarship about religious and ethnic minorities from the region that are indigenous to the region. It's really one-sided. I think that the impact would require us to look at who's getting placed as chairs of departments, what research is being funded, and what research is being published out of those departments. And a reason that I was speaking with a friend, actually, I think last night about this. One of the reasons why this is important to pay attention to is the stuff that gets published, the research we look at, it becomes canon. So that will be used by scholars and students and teachers and professors decades from now as something reputable. So we're seeing foreign influence impact what's going to be used in what's used in the classroom, not just today, but what's going to be used in the classroom by future scholars.
So we see a gradual growth probably of a anti-Zionist approach and view in Middle Eastern studies. Is that
Right.
correct?
Or just an erasure of it. It's actually interesting. So I here's a bit of a challenge for everybody listening or watching. Pick 3 universities, look up their Middle East studies departments, and see how many of them have a center on Israel, how many of them teach Hebrew, how many of them teach any other of the other indigenous languages of the region. Are there any of them that speak or talk or teach about the Kurdish people, the Druze, any of those, and really see, okay, is this actually a center for Middle East studies, or is this a bit of a revision of Middle East history and peoplehood?
Yeah, that's interesting. Um, And was there also recently at Georgetown University something revealed there about Qatari money and how it impacts what students learn there about Israel?
Right, there was a report put out by Middle East Forum about Qatari funding in the center at Georgetown University. Georgetown, I think, is getting rightfully so a lot of attention and how foreign funding is impacting and influencing what's being taught at the different centers and departments at that university.
Because Georgetown University, I think, has the tradition of delivering graduates to American government, right? Their
Right,
graduates are
there.
going to work in American government, a
Right.
lot of them.
The Georgetown, is it the School of International Service? I may be getting the title slightly wrong, but they graduate a lot of students that go on into our State Department.
Mhm. And those people, State Department deals with Israel and the relationship
Right.
between the United States and Israel.
Correct.
Okay. Um, so it comes across to me like there is a gradual effect of what's going on right now in terms of biased education in American schools and universities with regard to the history of the Middle East, the history of Israel, the history of the Palestinian people, the cultures, the people living in the Middle East, that there is a bias which is, I would say, yeah, maybe pro-Arabic or Islamist even,
I wouldn't even call it pro Arabic. It just is anti-Jewish.
anti-Jewish.
And
Okay.
when I think we've seen any of the protests and marches and demonstrations, people keep labeling them pro-Palestinian. I don't refer to them as that. They're simply anti-Jewish. They're having the materials being presented, the curricula being taught, the protests, the marches. They're not asking for or demanding rights for ethnic minorities that live in Gaza. They're not asking for equal rights between girls and boys and women and men for the people that live in Gaza. They're not demanding that there be an election in Gaza for democracy. They're not demanding that members of the gay community don't get killed and lynched in Gaza. In fact, every demand is something that is just simply anti-Jewish. It's against Jewish sovereignty. It's against Jewish emancipation. So I don't think that it's actually pro anything. It's really these are really anti-Jewish marches and protests and curricula.
You see, I'm originally from Holland. I only live in the United States since 20 years. Um, and when I was young, Holland was very positive about Israel. Um, and that radically changed and today it's radically anti-Israel and also in many cases anti-Jewish. Jews in Holland and other Western European countries don't feel safe anymore. I'm very worried to hear that the seeds for similar developments are now planted in the United States, which is in the education system, as it started that way in Europe as well, from what I've witnessed. Do you find it worrying?
I do. I think that what worries me isn't the seed as much the seeds that are being planted. It's that not enough attention is being paid to the pattern. So we can go back 10, 15, 20 years, 25 years in Western Europe and see it play out. We can also go back 80 years, 90 years in Muslim and Arab countries and see it play out where it became unsafe for Jews that were living in those lands to remain there. I think that there are multiple chances to reverse course or correct course in the United States, whether we're going to or whether there are enough people that are actively working towards that, achieving that goal. I think the jury's still out. I'm not sure. But we are seeing a very similar pattern. I mean, in the United States, think about it. We're a country of roughly 330 million people. We have roughly 54, 55 million children in public schools alone in the United States. You capture a portion of those and you capture future generations to institute policies that are actively anti-Jewish. That's one of the reasons schools are a target. Schools were a target for the Nazis, for the Soviets, for the Chinese Communist Party. I mean, we can go down the list. This isn't unique. There's a reason schools become a target to capture. There's a reason why so much of this stuff is being pushed in schools and not just at universities, but also in K through 12. And that's because when you capture the schools and you capture young minds, you capture the future.
Yeah. So in those kindergarten to 12th grade, the 5 to 18-year-olds, is money from Qatar also playing a role there, or only in universities?
It's playing a role in multiple spaces, including in the kindergarten through 12th grade space. And I just want to say, and it's not only Qatari money. So in the United States of America, we have a kindergarten through 12th grades public school system where every child can attend school from age 5 to 18 and get free 13 years of publicly funded education that parents and families don't have to pay for. That's already funded. It's funded by our tax dollars. In some districts like mine, funded quite a bit by quite a bit of tax dollars. There's no reason for foreign funding to pay for anything in that space. So when we look, again, it's not just Qatar. If we look at any foreign country, whether they're an ally or an adversary, we actually don't have need in the United States to receive foreign dollars in our kindergarten through 12th grade space. I think we need to really consider what that means when it's accepted in a school district. What type of influence does that have, and why? Where our public school system is well funded in America.
And is anybody paying attention to the effect it has?
We are. I mean,
Okay.
that is one of the things that our program, that our team is really looking at and focused on.
Okay. But the authorities are not.
I'm sure some are. Like there are people that we're working with, yeah. But again, one of the things, again, that's unique, and at least in the United States, in our public school system, kindergarten through 12th grade, is that the decisions made about what comes into the classroom are made at a very local level. So it's local, district, state level. The federal government does have some impact and they can have some influence, but it's not the same as they can have, say, at a public university. Kindergarten through 12th grade, those decisions are made locally. And unfortunately, one of the things that we're seeing that are hopefully, again, to kind of course correcting a little bit, is the average American voter doesn't pay a lot of attention to local politics. So they may know what's going on with Senator so-and-so because it's all over the news, but they don't know who's on their school board, where their tax dollars are going. And I think that that's one thing that we need to really address.
Yes, I agree with that. And I've heard that call for more attention for local politics in other areas as well. What is anti-Palestinian racism, or APR? And how does this concept currently affect education in America?
So we've seen the idea of anti-Palestinian racism, or APR, roll out pretty similar. It seems a little bit like the drafters of it were kind of following the path of the folks that drafted and pushed for IRA, the International Holocaust Remembrance definition of anti-Semitism, to institutionalize the idea of APR. Broadly, what it does is it erases Jewish peoplehood. So it replaces the Jewish people's story with this. It replaces Jews with Palestinian Arabs. So there's this whole idea that if you are a Zionist, if you believe in Jewish self-determination in the Jewish homeland, then you're committing anti-Palestinian racism. If you acknowledge Jewish people as the indigenous people of the land of Israel, then you're committing anti-Palestinian racism. If you deny that the Jewish people winning independence for the recreation of the modern state of Israel, deny that that was a catastrophe, you're committing anti-Palestinian racism. So what we're seeing is school districts using this definition to manage curriculum and what's taught in classes and how history is taught and how peoplehood is discussed. It started in Canada, like a lot of anti-Jewish things that we're seeing happen in our schools. Canada seems to be a pretty ripe testing ground. And once it kind of gets its foothold there, we're seeing it trickle down here to the United States.
Wow. So there is no room for Jewish peoplehood in history lessons, and no room for Zionism and the legitimacy of it
Right.
in history lessons.
And
Because
what there
that,
is room for is there's a lot of room to actually to even bring up the question. That question has been asked a lot, especially since, again, the October 7th terrorist attack, of whether Israel has the right to exist. I think it's actually a ridiculous question. Israel does exist. No one has the right to say it doesn't. This isn't up for debate or conversation. The people that want to bring it up for debate or conversation are the people that want to genocide the Jews. And I think that we need to stop engaging in that conversation. There's no reason to deny Jewish peoplehood, Jewish culture, Jewish indigeneity to the land. Being expelled from the land, being sent to all four corners of the world, to have lived in diaspora and thrive there, doesn't erase Jewish peoplehood or Jewish indigeneity. That's not up for debate.
right. And in which school districts, for instance, is this anti-Palestinian racism adopted in schools?
So I believe Berkeley Unified, Northern California, at least they were considering it. There was a school district in New York, and I can't remember which one, that was also considering it. But what we're seeing before it's being officially adopted or being presented for adoption at, say, a school district meeting, we're seeing it be implemented in training. So there are groups that come to school districts and provide teacher professional development training. So they've been training about anti-Semitism and training about Islamophobia. Well, they're slipping anti-Palestinian racism into those trainings and providing, again, the guidelines. So if you deny that Israel winning the war for independence was a catastrophe, you're committing anti-Palestinian racism. If you deny that Palestinian Arabs are the actual indigenous people to the land of Israel, then you're committing anti-Palestinian racism. Those guidelines, that teaching has already been rolled out to teachers across the country. LA Unified had training where this idea was presented. So it's already in classrooms. It's already being taught to teachers.
Wow. What measures are taken against anti-Zionist and anti-Semitic indoctrination in the American education system, and which measures are missing, you think?
I think we're having a lot of parents that are, and grandparents and community members and experts that are fully engaged in addressing anti-Semitism that we're seeing in schools. Part of that is by offering to provide training and teaching resources and curricular materials to be used in the classrooms. Wonderful. I think the part that's missing is that what we're seeing happen in our schools is more than anti-Jewish bigotry. It's more than that. It's definitely bad. The anti-Jewish bigotry that we're seeing is horrible. I think it's the highest it's ever been, at least in my lifetime, where it's being institutionalized in spaces that we never would have seen this type of thing accepted before, whether that's the halls of Congress or whether that's a school board meeting. But it's more than just anti-Jewish. We're seeing this clash between people that want to rewrite history behind people that want to actively and proudly engage in bigotry without being labeled as bigots, and those of us who say, no, that's unacceptable and that's not what's supposed to happen. So what's missing is the focus on that this is more than just anti-Jewish. When we degrade scholarship, when we ignore facts and history, when we replace teaching and learning with indoctrination and activism, that hurts all students, which hurts all of us.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, the Jewish students and professors and teachers are facing it really like head on right now and in a terrible way. And it's not just anti-Jewish. And I think that that's what's missing.
Yes. Okay. What can our listeners do against anti-Zionist and anti-Semitic indoctrination in America's classrooms? and also the replacement of scholarship with ideological learning.
First, know what's going on in your backyard. Know what's happening in your schools, in your alma mater where you graduated from, in the schools that your children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews attend, the schools that your tax dollars fund. Know what's going on. Know where the teachers get training, what organizations, what outside community organizations are coming into the school that your kids go to or your grandkids go to or that you're funding with your tax dollars. How are those dollars being spent? Are groups that are teaching that Jewish people are settler colonialists or that Israel's an apartheid state? Are those groups providing training to the teachers that your tax dollars are funding? Know what's going on. Get involved in any way you can. If you have the time and the ability and the heart, run for school board. If you don't, support somebody good who is, or another higher office. Know your school board members, your city council members, and make sure that they know you and your local representatives. Make sure that they know who you are. Write them letters, not just letters complaining, letters thanking them when they do something great, letters showing appreciation when they stand up against the tidal wave that's telling them to do something different. But be aware and get involved. And then also know which groups out there, Jewish groups, groups in general, that are actually working towards making a change. I think that we've seen, unfortunately, hundreds of millions of dollars spent over the past however many decades to fight anti-Semitism, and it's only gotten worse. Maybe that money needs to be spent in a different way. So look who you're donating to and see what their outcomes are. Are they actually able to have a positive impact on what's happening in our communities and schools? Or are they really good at giving a great interview or having a good television spot and, PR is wonderful, but the impact isn't there? But be aware, again, I said I'm a very proud American. We live in a democracy. Democracy requires participation. So
Yeah.
participate.
That's an excellent advice, I think. We're getting to the end of this conversation. Thank you, Brandy, for all the amazing insights and knowledge that you shared with us. Thank you for that, and I also thank our listeners. If you want to know more about our podcast and ourselves, go to the Never Again Is Now podcast channel on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or iHeart, where you can find also other episodes of our podcast. And please speak up against anti-Semitism and all hate.
Thank you.